It's my pleasure to welcome, finally, Justin Compton, the man himself. Nice to meet you.
How you doing, man?
As we spoke, we are not going to make it another podcast where we are going to speak about his past, about how he started. You can just hop into any other podcast and just listen about it. I'm just going to ask you, what are your current plans or what are you doing, perhaps coaching wise? Do you prepare anyone for the upcoming events and when?
Yeah, so that's my primary job right now is coaching, and I try to keep minimum 50 people on my roster, and I've been as high as about 130 to 150, and that's too much because I feel like my quality starts to go down at that point. Like I actually most of my clients will tell you I'm pretty interactive with them, but when you have 150 people, it's kind of hard to be personal with 150 people. So I think between 75 to 100 is ideal, but that's what I'm doing right now. And I train people from entry level, like novice, first competitors, and I've trained people all the way to the Olympia level. So all spectrums.
You perhaps don't remember, but we were supposed to work together, but I was the donkey back in then. I had really problems with my mind, and I'm not scared about it, admitting it that I had some mind fucks. And I was like, when you sent me the plan, I was firstly like, does he really prescribe this little of stuff? And then when I spoke to others, like with other of your client, different of your clients, they admitted like, no, Compton doesn't put you on a lot of shit. He focuses on food, he focuses on training, and he focuses on the sleep. And then when the time is right, you perhaps are grown enough to push the drugs up.
Yeah, and that's how I think it should be done, man. And I think everyone is going to agree or disagree on this, and everyone has what I say a limit of what they feel is you're pushing the limits, but also staying like conscious and mindful of your health in the process. Like for me, there's a limit of gear or anabolics that
What's that limit?
if you can't achieve a high level physique on this is probably not the sport for you. Now, that could be their training may not be efficient. And I see that a lot with people. Like, I encourage people to sometimes to send me their training videos, and I realize there's no intensity. Like it's up here. I'll see that, and then some people fail on the nutrition. But unfortunately, genetics does play a role. That like if your training is spot on and you're killing yourself every day in, day out for years on end, and your nutrition is spot on, and your gear is at that maximum threshold, and you just can't acquire like pro level size, that's where I'd have to sit down with someone. And I've never really actually had to have the conversation, maybe once or twice total. Like it's not a normal conversation to have just to say, hey, look, man, like this is maybe not for you. I was actually talking the other day about this on a different subject, on not on bodybuilding level, but like, so I'm a huge boxing fan. So, like for example, if you were to take a primetime Mike Tyson and put him in a straitjacket for 10 years, he can't even move his arms for 10 years, and I could box for 6 hours a day for 10 years. Let Mike come out of the jacket and train for 3 weeks. He would probably murder me just because he's built for that. That's what he's meant to do. So, when it comes to like being that size, your myostatin is going to play a big role as to how much muscle you're going to acquire. But you see a lot of I hate using the word disinformation or misinformation, mostly because of the COVID stuff. But you see a lot of these people on here, and they say to achieve X amount of size, it requires X amount of anabolics, and that's far from the truth. I've seen little guys on higher amounts, and I've seen bigger guys on little amounts, and everything in between on that as well. So, like, when you remember those old videos or when people would talk about Nasser and he would talk about like 10 grams of test. So, obviously, he was a freak. He was one of the biggest human beings ever. So, people see that size and they associate it takes that much to get there. Now, not many people has ever achieved the size that Nasser has, but let's just talk about Olympia level in general. Like, it don't take 10 grams to get to Olympia level, but because when you have one guy come out and say it, it's almost like it sets the standard across the board. And when you have somebody with a major platform that backs it up, it sends the wrong message to a lot of rookies, intermediates out there, and they're setting them up for failure. Like my question to these people that preach those type of numbers is like, they get mad when someone says I'm on TRT or I'm on a low cycle, and they try to call you out and they say that, oh, you're on a lot more. I'm going to flip the script on that and say, if you're taking X amount of stuff, like a very high amount of stuff, I want to see your blood work to see if you're actually taking it. I want to see if these guys really take what they say they take, because nowadays we live in a society where it's about clicks and views, right? So these guys will make out, oh, 10 grams of test a week or whatever, because they know people's going to click on that. So if you're talking those numbers about yourself, I want to see the labs. I want to see, is he really taking this much shit? Or is he just saying it in order to get clicks, views, or get coaching? You know, because you remember Boston, right?
Of
Lloyd?
course, I have interviewed him a few times.
So Boston was very misunderstood in this sport. You know, a lot, either you loved him or you hated him. And at first, I hated the guy. I couldn't stand it. But as we talked more, I realized Boston actually had good intentions. And he talked about his cycle. He experimented on his own body. But when you see when he works with other people, because when Boston passed away, several of his clients came to me and I saw what he had prescribed to them, and it was nothing crazy at all. It was like something that I would probably have someone do as well. So again, Boston didn't preach those numbers to say, hey, you need to use this. He just said, hey, here's what I did one time and this is what happened. But he did seem to care about people. But some of these people that put these numbers out, like, I feel like they're just trying to either one, experiment with someone else, like as a science experiment to see what happens, or two, they're just putting those numbers out to bring attention to them. I just can't imagine some of these numbers I'm seeing on the internet, like the last, probably within the last 2 to 3 years, that people are claiming. I just don't see how that's possible.
I'd assume that their gear is probably mostly fake because when we were both running, probably you tried as well, a little bit higher doses of trend, for example. And I know the real side effects that for example, you won't be able to sleep, you won't be able to eat. And when you are at least advanced, you know what the main things are. For example, I have watched loads of your videos, loads of your podcasts, and the main problem what you had was actually eating enough food not to drop the weight. For example, when you won the
Yeah.
Orlando and when you were heading to the Olympia and you were just
Correct.
dropping the weight no matter how much you ate. And as you said, Boston in the end admitted that in the end it's genetics. It's genetics that play the most important role. But those numbers, as you said, they bring clicks, they bring just views. And
Yeah.
highly doubt, especially when watching physiques of these guys, that they are taking this much because I assume that they would look a little bit better. When we are
Yes.
the subject of boxing, let's speak about one thing: Fury or Usyk.
You know, if you would have asked me this question 3 months ago, I would have said Fury all day. When I watched the Francis and Fury fight, I don't know if there was any staging in that fight, like maybe some politics played, some things happened behind closed doors. But I think a primetime Fury, when he's hungry, would destroy him. However, when I watched that Francis fight, that was not the Fury that I was expecting. It's almost like he was just going through the motions. They call it ring rust, where he hasn't fought in a good bit. Like, I don't know if it's an age thing or maybe he's just gotten comfortable. Maybe he just doesn't want it as bad as he used to. But I don't think Usyk is going to stand down. So I think if Fury shows up anything off of his game, there is a possibility that he will lose. And right now, I'm still going to lean on the side of Fury. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because he has a legacy as being undefeated. And I don't think he's willing to lose that legacy. I kind of feel like with the Francis fight, he thought that Francis was going to be a joke and he didn't really train hard enough. And Francis, if I was scoring that, since there was not a knockout involved, if I was scoring it, I would have scored it as Francis taking that title or taking that win. Like, that was my thoughts. I mean, I thought Francis had a better performance. Like, Fury's a little quicker because he's been doing this longer. He's a little bit faster, but I actually thought Francis beat him. And I think a lot of people thought that as well. And I think because Fury saw those comments, and if you watch the interview with the guy, I feel like he knows he lost that fight. He knows he didn't win that fair and square. I mean, ultimately it was a judge's decision, but they already had the Usyk fight scheduled. So therefore, from a political standpoint, there's no way they were going to let Fury lose that by decision. The only way Fury was going to lose is Francis was going to have to knock him out. No other way. And since that didn't happen, Fury got the win. But I feel like, I hope anyways, because I'm a huge Tyson Fury fan. I hope he's on his game, and I hope he walks straight through Usyk, and I hope it's a clear-cut win, knockout, and I actually kind of hope he retires at that point because he's beaten everyone that's crossed his path. Like, he has no one left to beat.
You probably read his book, and I hope that it's just not the exact moment when he won against Klitschko and he just had nothing to prove. You know, he's like at the same stage because now when he loses to Usyk, as you say, he's going to be like the worst heavyweight champion ever with his height advantage, with his weight advantage, with
Yeah.
his whole legacy, as you said. When you have mentioned the most important in my eyes thing in bodybuilding is training and intensity. I have seen, and you probably as well heard about the optimization of the training and searching for the place where the grass is greener. And for me, if anything is optimal, it has to yield the results. And when I
Correct.
see all of those perfect movements with actually zero intensity implied into them, I'm like,
Mhm.
is it optimal? Because, of course, we can do something better. We can improve. We can do it better mechanically. But when we speak about the balls, let's call it straight as it is, in the gym, I think lots of people lack it and they search for an easy way out. And that's the optimal training because it doesn't
Correct.
matter if you do it with one hand, with both hands. As you said, if you give it your all and your plan even is shit, you are going to look better than the guy that gives it like a 60, 70%.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is I'm gonna say this slogan here. I was actually training someone one on one probably around a month ago, and it was a female at my gym, and I was training her, and she was going to stop a few reps before she needed to stop. And I could see she was reaching. It was a belt squat. She was reaching to like set it. I said, no, no, you're not done. You're not done. So she's like groaning and straining on these reps, but she got them, and you could see the face, like, like. So I looked at her and I said, everybody says no pain, no gain. My philosophy is no strain, no gain. So if you're not like, if I can see you going through the motions, if you can talk in the middle of your working set, you're not working. You're not doing your job right. If I don't see some physical strain on your face, like, you're not pushing hard enough. So that's kind of been my philosophy. I've kind of used that slogan, no strain, no gain. So like, if that last rep that you just did was a complete rep and it was easy, you didn't go hard enough. You may have done it optimally, like from a mechanical standpoint, but you didn't have the intensity needed in order to stimulate muscle growth, which ultimately goes back to what Dorian used to say was your body doesn't acknowledge whether or not this is done on a cable, a dumbbell, a machine. It doesn't acknowledge any of that. It understands a stimulus and a load. So you have to put a load on that muscle hard enough and heavy enough in order to stimulate and give it a reason to grow. So, like, if you're just going to the gym and getting a pump, maybe you have a nagging injury or something, or maybe you just had a really bad, or maybe you have an emotional time. That's fine. But if you're doing that every day, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, like, you're just going to look the same over and over and over. So my philosophy when I was young, I didn't know who Dorian Yates was at that time. I was just learning bodybuilding, and at the time, Ronnie was the champ. So Ronnie was the guy everyone looked up to, and I learned to train off of a program called Max OT. It was a supplement company, and a few of their guys basically wrote the program, and it talked about intensity and taking things to failure. So essentially, it's kind of like a Dorian style program, except for my body I was able to handle significantly higher volume, but still keeping those principles of taking things to maximum intensity. So people say you can't have volume and intensity. You can. You can have both. You have to have it up here. Now, granted, I have encountered a few people that literally cannot do it. Like they can't do it and recover. And I feel like if you can't do it and recover, the intensity still has to stay the same. You just have to back off the volume to figure out where your body is going to find the sweet spot to continue growing and recovering. So some people may handle 50 sets, some people may only handle 10, but the intensity should be 100% regardless of who it is or what exercise it is.
I wanted to ask you about the reps in reserve, but I actually know the answer already, because there are, of course, loads of studies that say that you don't have to train to failure, that you can do like 2-on-1 rep in reserve, and it's going to benefit you the same way because you're going to be able to train more often. But actually, how can you find those reps in reserve when you have never pushed yourself to the failure, when you have never actually reached those effective reps, which
Correct.
actually bring you the muscle growth and the stress to the body that is needed to put the muscle on?
But let me go back a step here because you said studies.
Yes.
Keep in mind that these studies that people are reading is not done on high-end bodybuilders. These studies are done on likely to be average people, likely to be rookies, or I hate to say this word, but like beginner, intermediate level bodybuilders, like not top guys. Like when you're talking about a guy who's already a professional bodybuilder, he's got a lot of muscle mass, but he still needs more. You know, they're not doing studies on these type of guys. You know, bodybuilding is its own unique niche because again, it's like the protein synthesis, how much protein, how much carbs, how much fats. All those studies are great. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I will not disagree with them. However, they don't always apply to a very extreme sport like bodybuilding. And then not only just an extreme sport, but the elite of those sports as well. Like, you know, again, there's no study on to become, let's theoretically, you're 5'9" and you have 250 pounds of lean muscle on your frame, and then say use like the pound per square inch rule on how to do that. There's no studies on those type of men out there or women out there. You know, these studies that we're reading is studies that's done on maybe people who's coming back from rehab or injury, you know, people that just want to lose the dad bod and get in shape. And by get in shape, you know, our definition of in shape is much different than the average gym goer. You know, I see people all the time that'll have like a couple of abs and they're like, oh, yeah, I'm 7% body fat. And I'm like, more like 16 or 17. Like when you tell them that, I'm not trying to insult them by any means. I'm just simply correcting what they think is what it is. But you know, that's the type of people that those studies get done on. Like I have never seen or heard of a professional, not even a high-end professional bodybuilder, even like the guy who just turned pro that's a rookie, actually submitting himself to a training study, you know, like what we're talking about here. I've never known anyone to ever submit to that study. So they have no clinical evidence to back that up in professional bodybuilding terms.
Thing is that who would, you know, actually approve those studies on the guys who are, as we spoke before with us too, let's say, let's get a group of people who are taking the substances that are going to shorten their life, and let's make a studies on them. No one is going to approve those studies, as you said.
Correct. Yes.
Like,
I've said that before in the past as well.
yeah, it's
When
not
it comes
happening.
to anabolics, it would be more of well, for one, it's going to be a government issue because they're not legally allowed to prescribe tren, winstrol, you know, equipoise for human beings. So you are doing a full-blown experimentation, and there's no way that they're going to get funding. There's no way that they're actually going to have a study to back any of that stuff up. Protein, yes, I feel like that's not a problem. Like in order to get like a proper amount of protein, amino acids, you know, carbohydrates, fats, whether it's, you know, unsaturated, saturated, polysaturated fats, like all that stuff, they can get funding for that. But what they're not getting is the real test subject that we are looking for. You know, like bodybuilders, they're getting test subjects, yes. They're getting people who will come to the gym and work out, but they're not working out like a top end bodybuilder should be working out. They're not training like that. So those studies may be accurate for the groups that they're using, but not accurate for us to apply it to.
There's a huge difference because between working out and training, as you said, with the girl who, when she started to actually make faces, then she felt what is the failure. And you're still doing the personal training, which is interesting. And who trains harder and who are you able to push harder, the women or the men? Because we know that women are created actually to endure more pain because they are about to, you know, give us a child. So who trains harder?
I think I really can't answer whether it's a male or female thing because I have seen extremes on both ends. Now, because my clientele mostly consists, I would say I'm 75% men and 25% women. I hate to say this, guys, but the vast majority of the women push harder than the men. Like if I tell a woman to do something, now let's talk about competitors. I don't want to talk about the average woman who just shows up for a personal training session. But the women who are competing for a goal, I will see them oftentimes, often more times, give more intensity and more effort than the bigger guys. Sure, the guys may have more muscle, but that's also in our DNA. That's our genetics. Like that's just being a male. But as far as like the actual mental fortitude and intensity to push hard, I got to give that one to the girls.
What dog do you have? Because I see that you are petting a dog.
Man, this is a very a rough, sensitive subject right now because he's a Staffordshire Terrier. I don't. Let me see if I can get him here.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of see him,
Oh.
but he's got a lot of problems, man, and I'm gonna have to let go of him either this week or next week. It's not good, man. He's got a tumor in his throat, so it's
Sorry.
getting to the point he can't swallow, he can't eat. You know, last week I actually thought he died in my arms because I started when I found that out. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to restrict his diet no more. If he wants something, I'm just going to give it to him because he's got cancer. We can't fix it. We can't do surgery. We can't do anything. So whatever he wants to do, I just let him do whatever he wants to do. So I gave him a piece of bread, and I give him bread from time to time, and some people may criticize me on that, but whatever. But it got stuck in his throat, and I just watched him collapse, like completely flip over and start shaking. All I could do was hold on to him and just, you know, try to comfort him while he passed peacefully. And then he puked it up and acted like it didn't happen. But I know that that time is here because you can't really see it on camera, but I can see it right now that he's struggling just to swallow. So I think it's either going to be this week or next week. I have to do what I have to do, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that. And you know, people are so easy to come with the conclusions and so easy to criticize everyone because of their actions without knowing the purpose. Like you said, it's like his last days. Why wouldn't you just give him the best care that he deserves?
Yeah.
Because what's then, you know? It's just you are going to have the memories of him and he's going to remember you. Now, let's not go to the place because we are going to both get
Yeah.
you are kind of sensitive.
On this subject, man, very because, and you know, this is actually kind of a bodybuilding subject in a way. You know, a lot of guys, you know, whether no matter what caused the issue upstairs in your head, you know, I would say 2017, I had a lot of depression. I didn't, if you would have asked me that in 2017, I was in denial. I would have said, no, I'm perfectly fine. But now that I look back at it, I can realize I was in a very dark spot. And that just so happens I wasn't really planning on getting him. It just things just worked out that way for me. So, like I said, I'm very sensitive on this subject because he was my first dog, but he also has been kind of my best friend for the past 7 years. And yeah, he's got me through some tough times. So this is not an easy task. Like I'm trying to keep my shit together right now. So yeah, a lot of guys, you know, bodybuilding, I see depression in a lot of guys in bodybuilding as well. So handle it however they wish, but this was one of the things that helped me out a lot, and I'm going to lose that this week or next week too. So it's not fun, man.
We
It's
just don't
not fun.
speak about it because we as men think that no one gives a shit, to be honest.
Correct.
Because, you know, once you are depressed, it is going to go with you till the end of your days. That's the truth.
Correct. Yeah. You
True.
can't really, you can have good, hopefully everyone has better or more good days than bad days, but there is no such thing as like never having that feeling again. You're going to have some bad days along the way.
Yeah, the worst thing is that when you sit in the bed and you don't want to just move, you're like, I don't care. Even though you
I've
are,
been there.
and you
I've
have
been
to
there.
do it, and you are just forcing yourself and trying not to break because you have a lot of people that count on you, and that's what keeps us sometimes moving. Uh, let's just change the subject to something
Yeah.
we can laugh or at least have some. I think that you are going to have some rough opinion about it because I prepared this question. I have been watching I have watched the interview of Miloš Dilet and Dennis James. I think Chris Cormier was there as well. You know, they're having this Menace podcast, which is great actually. But this time, I I always love Miloš and Dennis because they support our era so much. But this
Yeah.
time they were like, do you remember who was seventh at this Olympia? Do you remember who was eighth? And then they went to the times of, 90s and so on. And they were like, in 1992, there was like eighth place was this and that. Ninth place was this and that. You guys remember that because first of all, you competed then. Second, you just had like 50 competitors all over the world. And third of all, they were speaking about that nowadays we have social media and still people don't remember those guys because there are so many classes and life goes on so fast that people just can't really, people have short memories. And when you speak to real fans, like for example, me or you, we'd be like, who was seventh? Criso. Who was eight? Tonio. Who was nine? Regan. We would just know.
Hey, hold on just a second, man. I don't know if he needs to go outside or not. Give me just a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Because
No problem.
he's very like
Yeah, I will just
need.
stop it for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said, they're like, no one actually remembers who was competing like this year because, first of all, they don't speak to like, the actual current fans. And the second of all, people have nowadays this short of memory. That's why TikTok is so popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't get why everyone, you always paid so much respect. I watch loads of podcasts like with this too, with Bader, with Roman, and so on, and they always pay so much respect to guys from 90s. On the other hand, it's always, like people nowadays are shit, people nowadays are not lean, people nowadays have no muscle. Why do you think it's that?
I really don't know, man, in a way. Like, I wasn't around to physically see the 90s with my own eyes. I was alive, but I was a kid, I was a child. And so I wasn't there at the shows, but I do think that like I said, I'm probably going to piss some people off with this, but that's the thing about bodybuilding. It's very opinionated, right? So if people get upset about someone's opinion, that's their problem. I think there was certain guys in the 90s that was very superior, but we also have certain guys in today's era that is very superior. So if you really look close at the guys of the 90s, look at the cameras, the quality of the cameras, look at the lighting. It's like, I'll give you a good example. I'm going to use someone of today's time. I'm a big fan of his. So, Flex Lewis. Everybody knows Flex Lewis.
Of course.
There was a photo of Flex, and I'm pretty sure Neil was in it too. He was in like a black and white. Maybe it wasn't black and white, but the lights in that gym was fucking spot on. And Flex reminded you of like the Dorian Yates of the 90s. And then when he's on stage, it didn't quite replicate that same look. And that's not because he got worse. That was because he was under like almost like a 90s lights, the way that they would have that set up. I mean, it was freaky both ways. He didn't get worse. It was just the way the lighting and stuff was set up. It's like if you put a spotlight directly on someone, it looks different. If you have overhead and then backlighting, it creates different shadows and different lines. So I don't think the guys of the 90s were significantly superior to the guys of today. I mean, sure, there was a few physiques that was absolutely incredible back then. but we have a few physiques today that just stands out above everyone else too. And I think that's going to be from the beginning of bodybuilding to the end of bodybuilding. You're going to have select few standouts, those genetic freaks that stand out. But again, the lighting, everything was better. And every now and then you'll have like that one show, like the 99 Grand Prix, the British Grand Prix. It's almost like everybody was on. Everybody looked freaky at that show. I mean, you look at the lights, that they had the lights set up, but everybody was actually on. But you know, sometimes that happens in today's time too, like where we'll have an Olympia where it's like, holy shit, 10th place at the Olympia, like looks like he should be Mr. Olympia. So I don't know why some of these guys have like they shit on the guys of today. It's like I feel like if they don't like today's bodybuilding, this is nothing towards Dennis or Milos or anything, because I like those guys, I respect those guys, and I didn't even watch the podcast, but I see a lot of the guys hating on today's bodybuilding. It's like, hey man, like you can either watch the old DVDs at your house or on YouTube, or you can just move on past it. But I don't see the point in just constantly being so negative, dragging someone else down, especially when they don't like these guys look great as well. So I just don't understand why people do that. You know, I respect the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and where we're at today and where we're going to be at 10 years from now, because the guys 10 years from now are probably going to look different than what we're staring at on the screen right now.
Yeah, because I played it especially because, you know, it is the same, it is put in the same quality as the 90s era bodybuilding was. And
Yeah.
actually, we can see the same quality of the video when they were
Yeah.
stretched, when it was VHS, and it was just a different quality of the video. And suddenly, these guys look the same or even better when it comes to the being peeled. Why? It's like every sport has moved up. Every like boxing, like athletics, everything moved up. Everything progressed. And we as bodybuilders suddenly got fatter, suddenly got smaller, until Kevin Lebron actually competed versus these guys. And he was like, yeah, they are damn big. He
Yeah.
competed
I don't know.
even against you, I think, in the 2008, yeah, on Olympia. You
Yeah.
competed.
Yeah. He was there in 2016. That was his comeback year. He got the special invite that year. I mean, I can't judge Kevin in 2016
Of
because
course.
I thought it was hilarious that the fans thought he was actually going to win that show. Like that was, I never thought 1 second that Kevin was. I was way off at the Olympia. Like it was not how I wanted to look. But I knew Kevin wasn't going to come close to me. Not at his age with the retirement, but like I think Kevin, for the most part, has been very respectful with the guys of today, and I don't think that's because he has a company. You know, a lot of people will sit here and they may say, well, he owns a supplement company, he's making money. Of course, he has to say certain things. But Kevin was always been very positive, regardless of what his position stands in bodybuilding. And I like Kevin a lot. You know, he put out a new song. Have you heard or seen it? It was
Yeah,
filmed in, I think, Austria, right?
yeah, he was actually speaking to Palumbo about it. And I know, you know, I think there are so many, so to speak, uncrowned Mr. Olympia that they are still kind of pity inside them that they haven't won. So perhaps they want to spill something on today's era that they
Yeah.
could have, like, you know, slayed it, you know, the left and the right, and that 10th guy from the past would have won versus today's like Hadi or Derek. There is no way. There is no
Yeah.
way that.
I agree with you.
And as we come to the almost the end, I have the one more question. Your early Arnold Classic predictions. Let's make it like top 5 maximum, because if we go further, it's going to be just boring.
Okay, so you have the list in front of you. I know Hadi's doing it. I know Samson's doing it. So that's
I will do.
obviously my number one and number two pick. And I personally think, and I'm going to justify why I say this as well. I think Hadi is going to win that show because a lot of people are saying the politics are going to work against him from walking off the stage. But I do wholeheartedly think that this year's Olympia, Hadi was nowhere near his best. We have seen him better, and I think he left the door open, and that's why Derek beat him. Not because Hadi wasn't at his best. I think Derek was genuinely the better guy that day. That being said, I feel like Hadi will not slip again. And a lot of people may criticize me on saying this, but they can't argue facts on what I'm about to say. Kody, this was his worst conditioning on stage that I think we've seen. Like on his back double bicep shots, that's where Derek was absolutely lights out and he killed him. Kody is normally lights out on that back double. When he's on the money, that dude's almost impossible to beat. So whether Kody decides to prep with Kody Rambod or whether he says, hey, you know what? Fuck Kody. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to be what I need to be, because we both know, if you look at history, and I know you know this too, he was like 2018 or 2019 whenever he like really came to the scene. And in my opinion, I think he should have won that Asian Grand Prix over Flex Lewis.
Yes.
Granted, Flex was off and Kody was just spot on. And to my understanding, Kody did that prep all by himself. That's the way I understood it. So if he knows how to replicate that kind of conditioning, and we know he does, I don't think you're going to see Kody off at the 2024 Arnold. And if that being said, I'm going to have to go Kody number 1. I'm going to say Samson number 2. And then I'm probably going to throw a curveball in here. I'm going to say Andrew's going to be 3rd. I mean, I don't know if it'll be a curveball or not. I mean, I think he's going to be your 3rd place guy. And then between 4th and 5th, this is going to come down to actually 4th, 5th, and 6th. So I'm going to call a top 6. I think these could be flipped in any order. If James is 100%, and James we've seen nail it before, and sometimes he hasn't been as on. If James can bring that crispy, sharp conditioning between him, the Neckzilla guy, a lot of people underestimate that guy because he's a rookie, but I think he has a lot of potential and a lot of talent. He's got to get a little bit harder from the front and the legs. But then the other guy that people don't seem to talk about much is the Horse HD guy. I don't know his real name. I just know him by Instagram on that.
Stelo.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So he actually brings a lot of muscle and he comes in shape. So I can respect him for that. Like he brings it. I don't see him placing any less than 6th place here. So that's going to be my top 6. Unfortunately, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. If I have to put a number on it, I'm going to say the Brazilian guy is going to come 4th. James is going to come 5th. And Neckzilla is going to be 6th.
Brandao is going to be better?
Do what?
Rafael Brandao. Don't you have him bigger?
No.
Is he like maxed out?
No, and I think this is going to come down to a situation where we were talking about myostatin DNA or genetics on how much muscle you can hold. Rafael, hands down, has the best structure on the stage. Like, if you could take his structure and add it to Samson's muscle mass or Kody's muscle mass, game over. New Mr. Olympia. But the fact that Rafael has not shown any significant improvement. When I say significant, I'm not talking about a pound or 2 pounds. Look at the guys in history. Look at Ronnie, look at Jay, look at Dorian, look at, Dexter as well. Dexter was on the slower progression side of things, but he did get there. Look at, like I said, you look at Phil, you look at Brandon, all these guys was making big jumps from year to year to year. And that's why they were able to rock themselves to the top really fast. Rafael has looked very similar in size year after year after year. So in my opinion, I don't know if that is training, and I don't believe it to be training just because he has the right people in his corner. I don't believe it to be nutrition because he has the right people in his corner on that too. I think he is doing everything in his power. And I mean, at that level, I'm sure he has. He's probably questioned, should I up the dose? Should I try this? Should I try that? And I feel like he's probably exhausted his options. I just feel like this is about as big as we're going to see him and about as successful as we're going to see him. I could see him coming in 7th here. Again, that's on a structural thing. He doesn't have the most amount of muscle, but he has a beautiful shape and beautiful structure. So he'll beat a lot of guys. He will continue to be an Olympian for a while, whether it be by points or whether he wins some of the, I hate to say this, but like win some of the smaller shows, but he's not going to be able to stand next to the big boys. Just because, assuming that the big boys come in shape, or at least 95%, they're gonna beat him because of size. I don't think. Also, I feel like I've never seen a picture of him before bodybuilding. I feel like he's a like a more of a petite frame, like a smaller guy too. So that goes against him as well. So for someone like him, he has to have muscle just stacked on top of muscle in order to beat some of these larger frame guys. Like Samson, if Samson were to stop bodybuilding and 5 years from now, you're still going to see him and be like, yeah, that's a very large man. You know, like he's got a big frame and he's filled that frame out well. That's why when he stands next to like Rami, people, I was shocked. I'm not gonna lie. I think it was 2022 when Rami was fifth place. I thought Rami would be the biggest guy on the stage, but then when he stood next to Samson, I'm like, shit, he's there really isn't a lot of size difference here. Like Samson's actually the real deal. He's big. So because he's big and he has good shape and structure, his problem is not dialing it in 100%. You know, if he can figure that out, Derek will be a little disappointed. So I don't know. That's just going to be a. I don't know if it's up here. I don't know if it's cheat meals. I don't know if he's off plan. I don't know if
Surely
maybe
not.
he's.
He lives with his, with his ex-coach, so to speak, because he lives with Marlenka, who is his wife, and there is no way that she lets him cheat. There is no way.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's a genetic thing that he's just not going to get that paper thin skin. And if that's the case, maybe it's a peaking issue. I have no idea, but I do know that like we've seen like this year's. Well, sorry, not this year. It's because we're into January, but the 2023 Arnold, he was pretty solid there. I was pretty happy with that physique. But at the Olympia, he was significantly softer at the Olympia. And then I think he did two more shows after the Olympia. One of them, I actually didn't have him winning that show. The Iranian guy, I think, actually could have beaten him there. But then the next one after that, it was game over. It was like he just figured out what was wrong and he did it and he got it right. But like, I can't see Samson I don't see him out of the top two. Like Hottie's the only guy I think, even if Samson's 85 to 90%, I can still see him, being second place at 85%. If Samson could actually 100% nail it and bring like Hottie's conditioning, everybody else should just go home.
I hope it happens because it's going to be actually interesting because I'd like to Olympia to be rotated more, not like 8 times Mr. Olympia, 7 times. I want it to be because it changed a lot within those, when Phil has stopped his reign. But yeah, I hope it's going to be interesting. Justin, thank you for taking your time. I know that you're a busy man. If you guys want to send your request for coaching, you can cut Justin I think by
Me up on
Instagram.
Instagram. That's the easiest way because I'll respond to you rather quickly there. It's gonna be the fastest way.
Just go to the Instagram. You have it in the description. And thank you for your time. See
Yeah.
you soon.
You're welcome, man.
We are going to speak like tomorrow, perhaps.
Okay. All right,
Have a good
man.
one.